This week we have a breakdown of UFC on FX 8, which was Vitor Belfort versus Luke Rockhold as the main event. Starting with the first fight on the card, which was Lucas Martins versus Jeremy Larson. Despite Jeremy Larson being the big underdog in his fight, he took it to Lucas Martins for the first 2 rounds. If I had personally stopped the fight after the first 2 rounds, I would have given it to Jeremy Larson. In the third round, however, he came out swinging, looking for Lucas again. Lucas, being the bigger, stronger man, caught him with a right hand on the counter, which gave him the KO victory over Jeremy Larson. Second fight, we had Jussier Formiga versus Chris Carriazo. A lot of people said that Jussier Formiga was the supreme grappler, and we saw exactly why. He took the first 2 rounds using exactly that, his supreme grappling. Tired Chris Carriazo round. When the third round came, Chris Carriazo started to come back with some good shots. However, it was too late into the fight. The third round ended and Jussier Formiga got the win by unanimous decision. Third fight of the night, we had John Lineker versus Azamat Gashimov. Apparently, Azamat Gashimov has real good wrestling, which I haven't had the chance to see. John Lineker was far the superior striker in this fight. Azamat, I didn't see him going for the takedown. I don't really remember. All I remember from this fight was that John Lineker was the much supreme striker with much more power in his hands, and he won the fight via a second round TKO. Continuing on with fight number 4, which was Fabio Maldonado versus Roger Hollett. This fight was all about cardio. The first round was 50-50, the second round was in Fabio's favor, and the third round was hugely in Fabio's favor. And it was all about cardio. Fabio just used his supreme style of pushing guys against the fence and using those short punches and just tiring him out, just tiring Roger out, into a unanimous decision victory for Fabio Maldonado. Continuing on with fight number 5, which was Yuri Alcantara versus Iliad Santos. And let's be fair, folks, this was a complete mismatch. Yuri won this easily via punches in round 1. Fight number 6 was Paulo Thiago versus Mikel Prazeres. Despite Paulo being quite a big favorite to win this fight, I thought Mikel fought really well and took it to Paulo standing on his feet. What I thought was the big telling factor in the unanimous decision victory for Paulo Thiago was his conditioning, heart, motivation and dedication for winning this fight. Paulo Thiago won it by unanimous decision, but not an easy fight. The next fight, we had my man Gleison Tibau versus John Cholish. Gleison looked bigger, must have been heavier, looked a lot stronger than his opponent. John Cholish, however, used some good speed and footwork to try get away from Gleison's power, which sort of did work until the second round when he got caught with a big straight right hand, and it was all downhill from there. Gleison Tibau won via a guillotine choke. After he had John hurt, he jumped on him and finished him with a nicely executed guillotine choke in round 2. Fight number 8 of the night was Francisco Trinaldo versus Mike Rio. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see much of this fight, but I can tell you that Francisco was a big favorite from the critics' side of view, and he won this fight via an arm triangle choke in round 1. The next fight was Nick Lenz versus Hakran Diaz. My boy Nick came through for me. I had a bet on him and he came through with supreme grappling. Hakran was the obvious bigger man, but Nick used real interesting style of his wrestling. I didn't know that kid can wrestle so well. He had Hakran against the fence for most of the first 2 rounds and using an interesting style takedown to dominate the ground and the grappling to win the first 2 rounds. Hakran Diaz came back in the third round with some real good punches. I mean, it was dangerous for Nick, but sadly, well, not sadly, it was just too late, and the fight finished with a unanimous decision victory for Nick Lenz. Fight number 10 of the night was Rafael Natal versus João Zeferino. and I did not see this fight, so I won't say much about it apart from the fact that it was a unanimous decision victory for Rafael Natal. And moving on to the first big question mark of the card, which was Rafael dos Anjos versus Evan Dunham. The critics were literally split 50-50 on this fight, which I was a little bit surprised about due to the fact that Rafael was really coming into his own. However, I did not see the fight apart from the highlights, and I did hear that despite the fact that Rafael dos Anjos won a unanimous decision, I did hear and still do hear that it was a lot closer fight than they were saying it were. However, Rafael dos Anjos won this one by unanimous decision. And moving on to the co-main event of the evening, Ronaldo Souza versus Chris Camozzi. Chris Camozzi was the second replacement for Ronaldo Souza as the other fighters pulled out. Let's be fair, this was a complete mismatch. Ronaldo Souza is a world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, one of the most devastating submission artists in the game. His stand-up game is also improving, and despite Chris Camozzi being a tough opponent to finish, Ronaldo Souza managed to get the job done in the first round via an arm triangle choke. And the main event of the evening, which was Vitor Belfort versus Luke Rockhold. Again, critics were pretty split about this fight. Most people going with Vitor, and the fight ended in that exact fashion. Vitor Belfort winning with a spinning heel kick, which landed on Luke Rockhold's head, put him on the ground, had him hurt. Vitor jumped all over him and finished him with punches in round 1. Which brings a close to the breakdown of UFC on FX, Belfort versus Rockhold. Thank you for listening in and tuning in to LSP's podcast, UFC breakdown and fight predictions of UFC fights as they happen or will happen. Make sure to tune in a couple of days where we will be posting another breakdown, this time of UFC 160, Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot 2, the rematch. Thank you one more time for listening.